Hi, and welcome back to Just Ask the Question. I am your host, Brian Kierman. With me, it's absolutely a pleasure and a joy to have with me Janessa Goldblatt. God, I'll get it right, Janessa. Forgive me, Goldbeck. Who's the CEO of Vet Voice Foundation. That's a national nonprofit that mobilizes veterans and military families. You recently filed an amicus brief in the Newsom versus Trump case about the deployment of the National Guard into Los Angeles, and recently testified at a shadow hearing, Spotlight Forum, about National Guard deployments and domestic immigration enforcement. Janessa, thanks for being here today. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me, Brian.
The thing I wanted, here's the question. I'm just going to dive into it. What the hell did you think of Donald Trump and the Pete Hegseth show today in Quantico before the generals and admirals? And before you get to that, let me just remind everyone that Donald Trump said, if you didn't like what he had to say, you're welcome to leave, but you can lose your rank and your job. And by the way, he sees American cities as training grounds for the American military, which he said the entire purpose of the American military is to wage and win wars. To me, it was frightening. To you as a veteran, what did you think of it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on the West Coast today, and I gotta say my blood pressure was a little high this early this morning, watching both Secretary Hegseth and Trump do this ridiculous dog and pony in front of generals and flag officers. These are serious people who are concerned with readiness, national security, and taking care of our troops. To haul them in front of what basically amounted to a vanity pep rally for the secretary and for the president was just disrespectful to their rank and the serious responsibilities they actually have. And I was impressed. Not, I guess my expectation was that the General Officer Corps would maintain bearing and not react to his litany of partisan gripes, but just the fact that they were even in that room when the government shutdown is looming over our heads, is just a testament to the absurdity of this administration.
And let's not forget, they had to spend millions of dollars in American tax money to get them there. They came from all over the world.
That's right. I mean, millions of dollars lit on fire for what? For Pete Hegseth to talk about grooming standards and how many pull-ups he can do? I mean, it is so embarrassing. And I think that the rightly so, Trump's comments about the enemy within and police, using the military to police American cities are getting a lot of airtime, as they should. But it's not the first time that this
Nope.
president has said things like this, and we've seen this now pattern of deployments of National Guard to American cities against the wishes of local law enforcement and local elected leaders. This president has no desire to quell things or to reduce crime. Like, all of that is whitewashing for what he's trying to do, which is turn the military into a tool of his own domestic power and control, and to draw a line between American citizens and those who are serving in uniform.
And do you think he'll be successful in doing it? And what do you think the reaction will be from these? These are flag officers, right? And with that said, before we started, I told you what someone I knew who was in that room texted me is that the day we see an A1M1 tank rolling down the streets of an American city, the democracy will officially be over. I think we're already there. I think you said the same thing. To me,
I mean, there's already strikers deployed in Washington, D.C. There are already armored vehicles being sent to American cities. The president has made a number of very alarming statements about how he sees the use of the military going forward and what its purpose is. I mean, even our national defense strategy that this administration has put out is focused on the homeland instead of our very near peer adversaries, who are, I'm sure, thrilled with this administration's complete abdication of our true national security priorities. So, yeah, I mean, I think the ship has sailed, so to speak. That we are in a full blown constitutional crisis, and this president has no intent on strengthening our democracy or making Americans safer. He wants to rule us like a king, like an authoritarian, and use the military as his own personal hit force.
and so what do you think of the officers who were in that room? Do you think they'll go along with that, or do you think they're going to be cautious in going along with that, or will they not go along with it at all?
I mean, this is one of the real challenges of the way we have imbued the executive branch with certain authorities. I get this question all the time. Well, when is the military going to start refusing these orders? To date, with the possible exception of how the active duty military and National Guard were used in Los Angeles to actually conduct law enforcement activities, to date, the president hasn't done anything that is blatantly illegal. It is
Right.
lawful but awful that he has the authority to deploy the National Guard against the wishes of the governors. And at this point, I think for me, the real sort of turning point was over the weekend when we heard him say, "I'm authorizing the National Guard to use full force in Portland." If the president is ordering the Guard or the military to fire on American civilians, that is, of course, an unlawful order. And at that point, I would want to see, I would expect to see officers and everyone down to the most junior enlisted refuse those orders, because they have an obligation to refuse unlawful orders. But at this point, what we're seeing is just a complete breaking of norms, and also a overreach, I believe, of the executive and how they're reading his authority.
And that's the unlawful order part I get. We've seen in our past, 4 dead in Ohio, the Kent State massacre, where a National Guardsman did fire on a crowd and did kill some people. 4. And that wasn't authorized by the president, but it was someone on the ground who, lost their shit, basically. And here we have rebuilt. I mean, when I was a kid, the military wasn't anything that you wanted to aspire to. It wasn't looked upon favorably because of the Vietnam War. It
Yeah.
took many years to rehabilitate that. And, now I find it comforting to run into members of the military and have people say, thank you for your service, particularly after some of the things that went on, the Gulf War, and which they referred to today. But I fear, and you are a veteran, so you would know better than I fear that these actions are going to destroy the favorability and the credibility of the U.S. military in the United States to a point that it was during the Vietnam War. Or
I completely share that concern, Brian. I see Trump and this administration setting the military up to be the bad guys here, and so I think it's really important that all of us understand the difference between ICE and the National Guard in particular. The National Guard, these are mostly young men and women from middle and working class America who raise their right hand to serve their country overseas and respond in times of need from their communities, wildfires, floods, etc. They did not sign up to conduct immigration enforcement. They didn't sign up to police their own neighborhoods. This president is using them in that way, in addition to using them in completely wasteful ways, like making them pick up trash on the National Mall at the cost of millions of dollars to taxpayers. I mean, it is so disrespectful, and it really does set us up for this problem where, ICE is wearing all kinds of crazy uniforms, no uniforms at all, masks, etc. And for the average American civilian who doesn't have experience with the military, it is hard to delineate who those folks are. So I think it's really important that those of us who have platforms make it clear that the National Guard is not deploying in these places of their own volition, that they're being asked to do a mission set that is really beyond what they're supposed to be doing, and really a break from what is expected of them. And that, these folks don't have the opportunity to say no in a lot of cases like that.
right.
They're federalized by the president. They have to go at the expense of their day-to-day jobs, their time with their families, and morale, among a lot of other things.
Well, let me. There are 2 big key topics I want to talk about the speech that happened today. But I do want to go back to something that I said at the beginning about the amicus brief that has been filed with Gavin Newsom. I was on the ground at the protests in L.A. I have to tell you, I did not see the violence that Donald Trump professed existed. In fact, I've been to more violent high school football games than what I saw in Los Angeles.
Yeah, so we filed this brief from just about a dozen retired general officers and admirals that said, this is not how the National Guard is supposed to be used. It cautions about the dangers of politicizing the military, a lot of the things we just talked about, that division in our society and the disrespect that may grow from putting the military in these really politically contentious positions. But you're right. I mean, I was on the ground in Los Angeles as well. I spoke with the mayor. I sat down with some local guardsmen. I stood side by side with law enforcement to ask them about what they needed. And this is a TV president who wants made for TV moments. The
Bingo.
spectacle at Quantico was exactly that today. It didn't make us safer. In fact, it operationally jeopardized a lot of the work that those flag and general officers have to
Yeah.
do, let alone putting them all in one room together. I
Yes.
mean, just like not even the event at Quantico. I was thinking about like the airport. Like most of these people, I'm sure, flew in on commercial flights. Like the risk factor to do what, to accomplish what, so that Pete Hegseth could like tee up his eventual Senate run or whatever it is he's going to do next. Like
You wanted to
all
show
of
off
it.
some more tattoos.
Yeah, exactly. This is all, I mean, it just underscores over and over again that this is all about them, their vanity, the image they want to project, and not about Americans, not about our safety, not about our security, not about our national security. It's all just made for TV moments. And just because, he says over and over again that Portland is a war zone, and you've got the chief of police on TV saying there are peaceful protests on one city block. Like, I don't know. I
That's
mean,
what happened in LA. That's
yeah,
exactly
exactly.
what happened in LA.
Exactly.
It was 2 streets. That's it. I mean, 3 blocks away, there are people sitting having tea going, what the hell's going on? I
Yep.
mean, look, Portland, Oregon as a war zone. Oh, come on. I've been to war zones. If Portland,
Yep.
Oregon is a war zone again, well, that would be the Saturday morning kiddie football games are more dangerous. That's just
Truly. I just think it really, it's embarrassing for our country. We haven't even talked about the like delivery of Trump's speech. I think we're all so numb now to his sort of his ranting and the crazy things he says, the lack of grammar. But I thought this morning was the most addled I've ever seen the president look, especially in front of all of these senior officers. And I
I think he
just
was intimidated. I've been standing in the same room, 5 feet away from the man, and he gets intimidated by people who have legitimate, have gravitas. Because, as you said, he has none. He's an actor.
That's
It's
right.
to him, it's all a TV game show, or reality TV. I thought some of that was him being addled. I saw the same thing you did. I thought some of it was intimidation. I still think, if you want to argue that Joe Biden slid into senility, I'm going to tell you that Donald Trump took the cold water plunge. I mean, I think he's boom, but that's
And
just me.
And I'm laughing, but I just like I guess at this point, I feel a lot of sorrow for my brothers and sisters who are serving right now, who have to
Me
deal with
too.
this, who have to put up with a Secretary of Defense who belittles the accomplishments and merit of people who are in uniform, who have earned their rank and their jobs, of the trans service members who have been booted and whose benefits are being questioned, and then our like service members who are deployed overseas, who are in very dangerous places right now. And clearly this administration does not have its eye on the ball. Is not putting our safety and security first. And I'm like, on top of that, for all of the Americans and the people who live in America who are trying to immigrate here the right way and be citizens and be productive contributors to our society, who are being targeted by this administration. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're an immigrant or American citizen. If you have brown skin in this country right now, the Supreme Court has given ICE free license to pull you over and toss you in jail. We've seen American citizens, veterans, their family members get swept up in these raids. So we're just living through a really dangerous time in our country, and one where everyone, if you're not in the president's inner circle, like you should feel pretty unsafe, because this country is no longer as free and fair as it was
Oh,
a year ago.
I will agree with that. I want to talk about that danger, but to drive that point home, I was in Detroit the weekend before the election, speaking to a group of Arab American businessmen. Donald Trump was there speaking to a group of Arab American businessmen trying to get their vote. And we stayed in the same hotel, and I ran into one of his people that I know very well. And I said, so if you guys get back into power, you put me in prison? And they said, don't worry, Brian, you're far down on the list. And I said, that's not comforting to me. It's not that where I am on the list. It's the fact that you have a list and you admitted to it. and I'm on it.
Right.
How many hundreds of others are on that list? They will. I think he ran for president this time to avoid prison. I think now that he's won, it's nothing but a revenge tour to go after everyone who ever felt wronged him, including the U.S. military, which he's
Right.
never been fond of.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
bone spurs. But
Yeah. I mean, well, and for him, he can't fathom what it means to, sign a blank check payable up until the value of your life to, it is
yes,
so
sir.
antithetical to who he is as a person, which is all about taking and taking and taking. So for him, it's why he said all the despicable things he said about veterans being suckers and losers, questioning
Yes.
what they got out of it for those who made the ultimate sacrifice. And so it's just, he just can't comprehend it. And I think he knows, well, I don't know how self-aware he is. I don't want to speculate on that, but
No, I
it
don't either.
yeah,
But there is a saying. I don't know. Did you ever see the movie Tombstone?
of course.
There's a great line where Val Kilmer is talking to Kurt Russell. And he says, what's Johnny Ringo? What makes a man like him tick? And he says he's got a big hole in the middle of him, and he can never steal, rob, or kill enough to fill it. What does he want? He wants revenge for what? For being born. And I got
That's
to
right.
tell you, every time I hear that, I go, that's Don. That's Puff Donnie. That's who
Yeah.
comes to
And
mind.
unfortunately, a lot of people in our political system, but
Oh
yeah,
yeah. Well,
but definitely he's the chief ringleader of them all.
let's talk about. You served in the Marine Corps, right?
That's
Is it
correct.
Semper Fi? My uncle was in the Marine Corps, and he was the one who taught me how to shoot. And to this day, I value everything he ever taught me. And when he talked about being in the Marine Corps, and this was during the Korean War, I can't
Hmm.
imagine that I would want to go through what he went through.
Oh
But
man,
yeah,
yeah. Seriously, that's a tough guy right there.
yes, he still is in his 80s and still tough. Um,
Awesome.
but there was something that Donald Trump said, and during his time in front of those people in Quantico, that I think is the biggest danger, and I'd like your thoughts on it. He talked about nuclear weapons, not using the N word. There are two N words you can't use, but he said, at the end of the day, we have more of them, and we can do more with them. And to me, this is just an abdication of the mutually assured destruction policy, and it is obviously the guy doesn't get it.
Mm-mm.
It doesn't matter if I can blow the world up 132 times and Russia can only blow it up 70 times. You only have to blow it up once.
That's right.
And that's, I don't know if you're younger than I am, but during the it was in 1983, the day after this television show that showed the effects of a nuclear war. And afterwards, they had Ted Koppel had a special on, and he had Carl Sagan and generals and members of the government, and he was talking about it. And it was at that point in time that Carl Sagan coined the term nuclear winter. And he
Mm-hmm.
said, imagine how crazy this is. Two people with a lit match in a room full of gasoline arguing over who has more matches,
Right.
which is how he looked at but to me, I think Donald Trump is potentially far more dangerous than anyone that we've had as president, for the simple fact of the matter with that statement about nuclear weapons. He doesn't get it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason that people on both sides of the aisle for many years have agreed that this mutually assured destruction is not like a debatable concept. We know the impact and consequence of nuclear weapons, and this is exactly why Donald Trump is so dangerous as a president. He's reckless. He's uneducated. He doesn't he doesn't read as far as we know. Everything that's been reported about like
No, he
briefing
doesn't
to
read.
be given
I
to him.
can tell you that.
And
as
he watches Fox and Friends, and he acts based on the last conversation somebody had with him. He rants about Russia, then he meets with Putin, and Putin's his best friend, and then he rants about Zelensky, meets with Zelensky, and Ukraine is his best friend. This is not a guy who is a strategic thinker, even a tactical thinker. He's just operating on impulse, and that's terrifying. I mean, it's really the first time I've heard him venture into that subject matter. But yeah, it's terrifying. One of many things that are very scary about him being in the position that he's in.
So, what are you trying to do as the CEO of Vet Voice Foundation? How can you have a positive effect on what's going on?
Yeah, well, I think in this moment in time, even though President Trump is really stretching the bounds of what the military should be used for. Veterans still have one of the last sort of voices in our society with cross-partisan respect and appeal, or even people who are politically disengaged, don't identify as either party. Like, there is still some credibility
Yes.
there to a veteran's voice. So one, people who are on active duty, who are wearing the uniform today, they are prohibited by law by speaking up and speaking out. So it's our responsibility as people who've worn the uniform to really share the perspective of veterans who are committed to the Constitution, to the values enshrined within it, not to a man, not to a political party, to really make it clear to the American public that this is not normal, and to communicate the stories we're hearing from folks who are being deployed into these places or are
And what are
currently
you hearing?
Well, I'll tell you, a couple of weeks ago, I had a conversation with the mother of a National Guardsman who she herself served as a general officer in the Guard. She's retired now, but her son is actively serving. And he was explaining to her the way that these deployments have impacted morale, because their folks are being deployed and extended. They're being deployed in DC, very cynically deployed for under 30 days, which means they're not eligible for health care. They are, if they're injured while they're while they're mobilized in DC, they might be eligible for their like state workers comp, but not health care. They're being taken away from their families, from their jobs, from their children. To do what? To be, part of a photo op and a political partisan stunt. So, this young man was telling his mother, Mom, online they're calling us the National Gardeners. Like, this is not what I signed up to do, because they're out there on the mall with trash bags. We're also hearing from folks who are still in at very senior levels, who are just, I think there's two sort of things motivating people who are still in. One is to try to mitigate damage as much as possible. And, a lot of folks, I talked to a lot of retired generals, recently retired and those who've been out for a while. And if you've been in for 25, 35 years, most of these people have this very strong orientation to not be political. And the fact of the matter is that we have never been in a situation like this, in the modern era. Maybe not since
Not in my lifetime. Not even
right.
during the 60s. It wasn't
Right.
like this.
No, I mean, it was, and
There were
so
still guidelines. There were still guardrails. There was still the military was there, definitely not to be on American soil going after
right,
American citizens.
right. And so I think, we're seeing this real tension between folks who they want to preserve that civ mil divide that really makes our military the most professional fighting force in the world, but they also want to speak out and they want to be able to push back and say this isn't normal. So our job is really to help elevate the ones who have made the decision to speak out, to sort of break with that sense that generals should not be engaging in this political discourse, but because the ones that are in uniform cannot. And I think at this moment, it's never been more important for their voices to be heard and for the voices of veterans as well.
So my question then is, those members of MAGA who say that you're merely too woke, the military is too far left, you're made of radical. I'm just telling you what they're saying, because to me, every time somebody says the violent radical left, I go, the radical left, they don't even want you to own guns. I don't know
Right.
what the hell that's about. Violent how? Are they out there with bows and arrows? Am I missing something? But their words, the violent radical left has taken over the military. You're too woke, and you've abandoned your own mission.
Yeah. I mean, to that, I say, okay, well, first of all, what years did you serve so that you can tell me about your experience? Most of them have not ever worn a uniform. Second, the military didn't put in policies of that make it easier for Black men and women to serve, so because their hair grows a certain way, because they wanted to be woke or politically correct. They did that because the American populace is diverse, and in order to recruit and retain the most exceptional people, we need to have policies that reflect the reality of those people who are serving. And the
Or
fact of
any
the
people, attract any people. It's a
That's right.
volunteer
That's right.
organization.
We I mean, we most young people today are not interested in serving in the U.S. military because of what they've seen and heard, what they've seen and heard from Republicans specifically about what it's like to be in the military, the denigration that this administration has, painted the military as this, place of political correctness. I mean, I served in the Marine Corps as an officer. I served as a combat engineer. I served in all types of units. Second to last unit I was attached to was an infantry unit. I can tell you, it wasn't very woke. I had a very successful career. I enjoyed my time. But no one was complaining about the Marine Corps infantry being too woke. I can tell you that much. It's so absurd to me. Like, the military has a mission it has to meet, and it's going to seek the most qualified people to do the jobs. This whole thing about, women and combat arms standards really drives me absolutely crazy, because when the combat exclusion policy was repealed in 2015, the way it was repealed was that there were gender neutral standards for all combat arms professions that were put into place. So in order to be a tank officer, you have to meet a certain standard.
Right.
Going on from there, that has been the case since the combat exclusion policy was repealed, and women have been serving honorably and successfully in combat arms roles since it was repealed, and even before, because there were no front lines in Iraq and Afghanistan. Like, if you were a logistician driving a truck down a highway and you got hit by an IED and you took fire, you were returning fire. That's a combat arms job. So the reality is, everybody needs to be able to perform to the mission set that they're being sent on. The military is not putting people in harm's way unnecessarily for the sake of political correctness. They're, putting together standards for everyone. Anyone who's qualified to meet them can serve in those positions. Like, it is so frustrating that this Secretary Hegseth is relitigating these culture wars that have already been settled, that we've seen people serving honorably and performing exceptionally in these roles, and for him to make this the focus of his his leadership is so juvenile. It's like, I said this earlier, it's like he's got this 1980s cartoon version of what the military should be, and he hasn't grown up enough to understand that we are actually a very sophisticating fighting force, and we need people of all different types and all different strengths in order to achieve the mission.
I think he may, and you correct me, you are a former member of the military, you are a veteran, but to me, on the outside, only having covered the military for 40 years, it seems to me like he's compromising combat readiness with these juvenile antics.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this again. This is the most absurd thing. This has gotten covered in the press, but maybe, I think, to a lesser degree, because it's such an indicator of where this guy's head is at, and the fact that he is truly trying to reshape the military into a Christian white nationalist organization. So there is a policy in the military now. If you have a certain skin condition where your hair on your face grows in curly, you can get something called a no-shave chit. Most of the time, people who are serving in the military are not forward deployed in a combat zone where they might need to put a gas mask on. That's the reason that we have clean-shaven faces in the military, because it can mess with the gas mask seal. But most of the time, people are not deployed into areas where they're going to need to wear a gas mask. That policy specifically allows Black men to serve in the military, because that condition only affects, the vast majority of people affected are Black men. So we have had this ability to get something called a no-shave chit. Your commander can authorize it, and you can serve with a neatly kept beard. Okay, this has not impacted combat readiness in any shape or form. In fact, militaries all over the world allow men to wear neatly kept beards.
Since like World War I, when they invented the gas mask. Yes.
Correct. Exactly. Yeah. Thank you. Secretary Hegseth has now rescinded that ability for people to get those chits for them to be made at the commander's level. So what does that mean? If you can't comply with the new policy, you're out of the military. Even if you are an exceptional soldier, airman, Marine, even if you have had an exceptional career, you've served honorably, no, we're going to kick you out because you need to have facial hair so that your face doesn't swell up and burst into pustules. Like that, to me, is the most blatantly racist, obvious way to try to fiddle around the edges to make this force look like his, He-Man Marine force that he read about in the comic books when he was 8 years old. It's just, it's so immature, and it is so disrespectful to everyone who's ever worn the uniform.
I think you may be overshooting when you say 1980s. I think he'd like it to be the 1860s and the Army of Virginia, but that's just me.
Fair point. Don't get me wrong, Brian. Like there's a lot of things that could be approved about the military.
Oh yeah,
I don't want to fall into the trap of being like it was all great and generals have it and blah blah blah. Like I would love if we had a Secretary of Defense that was focused on increasing the combat effectiveness of all of our troops in uniform, making sure their physicality is up to date, is up to speed.
And I got no problem with that. Yeah.
Could use a revamp of that. One of the things that I've never heard Pete Hegseth talk about is our maintenance and acquisition. Like the fact that it takes so long to get new gear fielded, to get gear updated, maintained. Like that is a huge problem that we are. Look at how many ships we are constantly having to send back from forward deployment because they break on the open ocean. Like that's a huge liability. But this guy's focused on relitigating these flashpoints that are fodder for Fox News, and I guess this is what you get when you hire a Fox News host to run the Department of Defense.
That in his makeup room that he had to have in the Pentagon, that would just, I'm going, I don't even know where to go with that.
Yeah, if you're gonna rant about like gender affirming care and gender neutral standards, and then install a makeup room in your office, like you're opening the door for us to make a lot of fun of you, bro.
All I can say is there are a lot of closeted people on the MAGA end of and I wish they weren't.
Everybody just come out. It will be a lot nicer. Like you don't have to be like this. Yeah, enjoy your life. Like, geez Louise, stop making the rest of us miserable because you don't have to.
Well, like a friend of mine says, he goes, "I don't want to yuck your yum. Whatever is fine with you, as long as it's among consenting adults and there's not underage kids involved."
Absolutely. Well, this is just what I'm like. Where are I serve with so many libertarians and so many folks who didn't identify as right or left, but just, want a government that's competent, that leaves them alone for, the stuff that's their personal business, and then empowers them to be economically successful, to feed their families and have a good life, buy a house, all that. And we're so far away from that right now. We're just talking about all this stuff that impacts less than 1% of the population, getting twisted into knots about the places we disagree when there is so much that average everyday Americans agree on. And it's so frustrating that we have to be talking about these things when there are real issues at stake and real problems that need to be solved. And we have an administration and I, dare I say it, Democratic leadership that can't seem to focus on priorities that actually matter to a lot of people.
Don't get me started. No matter how low the Republicans go, the Democrats can barely crawl over the bar. Imagine how bad your party must be that you can't find someone to beat someone as loathsome as Donald Trump. I mean, the 26 to 30% of the people in the United States, 38% didn't vote. Only 31% voted for him. There's a majority of people out there that don't like him, but you couldn't find someone to run against him.
Well, and should we have a free and fair election in 2026, which is a big question mark.
I think they're having the military in the streets to get us used to that for voter suppression in 2026.
I 100% agree. And the reason I agree with that and feel so confident saying it is because they've said it themselves. They've floated a national emergency around, voter fraud. That's how Trump came into power, and all of it was this, conversation about voter fraud and
War ravaged Portland.
That's right.
Yeah, that's
So imagine, I don't know, a couple states off the top of my head with Democratic governors that are very important electorally. Michigan, where all of a
Illinois.
sudden there's a national emergency and we've got the National Guard deployed in the streets, which you know uh, would absolutely deter people from coming out to the ballot box. And I think we should be preparing for that reality, and we should be talking about it in our communities, because I do think, like you said, that this is trying to desensitize us to military in the streets. Where the pot is already hot. It's about to get even hotter. And I just hope that Americans will, wake up, the ones that are not like politically, that think it doesn't matter, and show their discontent in a peaceful manner, but in a way that hopefully gets us back on track. I don't know. We're in a tough time.
Yeah, we are. Last thoughts before I let you go. For the military, what do you think is going to happen? What do you want? What's your hope?
Well, I really hope that everybody who's serving right now in the National Guard, who's getting federalized, is getting paid on time and getting their health care and benefits, and getting some communication from their commands about what's happening. I was just down on the southern border last week touring Operation Lone Star, which is the over 3-year deployment that Governor Abbott has sent the Texas National Guard down there to secure the border. I met with a young National Guardswoman who actually earned her citizenship through her service in the National Guard. And when she was first deployed there as part of the first wave, they were told they would be there for 3 months. Then they were extended to 6, then 9, then 12, and eventually 14 months. So she did 14 months back to back without any, knowledge going down there that was going to happen. So, aside from the mission, the awfulness of the mission itself and the unnecessary escalation of the mission itself, these are real people, real young people in most cases, who are not necessarily being taken care of by their leaders, who are punching them out to Washington D.C. or whatever, to flatter the president. So I hope that those people are okay and that their leadership takes care of them. But I think more broadly, I really hope that we as a country can, as we come through this period, and I hope that we are able to do that and still be a democracy, but that we really rethink what it means to have a division of separation of powers, that we look at some of these authorities like the Insurrection Act and re-examine some of the checks and balances that used to exist between Congress and the executive branch, and demand that leaders that we put in office actually use their power to provide a check on an executive. This can't happen again. And unfortunately, I don't know how this chapter ends, but hopefully something a stronger democracy emerges from it.
From your mouth to God's ears. I want to thank you for being with us, Janice. It's a pleasure to talk with you. Very enlightening too. I'd like you to come back and we'll talk.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, please. Thanks for having me.
Anything you want to plug before you go?
No, I guess if you're a veteran, member of a military family, or you just care about, the issues we're talking about, come check us out. Follow us on social media. We're Vet Voice Foundation, and get involved. We need everybody, and now is the time. Now's the time. Time is maybe running out for us to use our voices in our democracy.
There you go. On that wonderful note,
have a great week.
Have a great week. I'll be here all week. Try the veal. I want to thank everybody for joining us. This is Just Ask the Question. I am your host, Brian Karam. We'll catch you next time.